Hello, friends and family. I hope it's sunny and bright where you are because things are about to get dark on today's episode of Scandals, Intrigue, Nightmares. I'm your storyteller, Alexis Morgan, and this is the bi-weekly podcast that provides an escape from your Monday morning commute with a story about sinful real-life events. Today I'm telling you about a fairly recent scandal that brought down one of America's most beloved superstars. It's the Vick Dogfighting ring. This content may not be suitable for all listeners. Proceed at your own risk. This is a recount of events based off of public news and content and with personal opinion commentary. Sources will be cited at the end. According to the Humane Society Dogfighting Fact Sheet, available online, dogfighting is an inhumane blood sport where dogs who have been bred, conditioned, and trained are placed in a pit to fight each other for spectator entertainment and profit. Fights average 1 to 2 hours, ending when one of the dogs cannot continue. Illegal gambling often takes place on the side. In the U.S., dogfighting is considered a felony in every state, including Washington, D.C., Guam, Puerto Rico, and the U.S. Virgin Islands. However, thousands of people in this country take part in this multi-million-dollar industry every year. Pop culture has glamorized dogfighting and the ownership of big, tough dogs. American pit bulls, or as I will be referring to them for this episode, just pit bulls, are a descendant of the English bull baiting dog, bred to bite and hold bulls, bears, and other large animals around the face and head. When baiting large animals for sport was outlawed in the 1800s, people turned their dogs on each other, thus introducing the quick and agile terrier into the breeding pool. According to the ASPCA's dogfighting webpage, quote, "It is not unusual for $20,000 to $30,000 to change hands in a single fight. Stud fees and the sale of pups can also bring in thousands of dollars." Our story begins in 1980. Michael Vick was born on June 26 in Newport News, Virginia. He was the second of 4 kids to his parents, who were at the time unmarried teenagers. Vick's family did not have a lot of money, so he grew up in a particularly rough part of town. His neighborhood was a public housing project called Ridley Circle Homes, where it is reported that drug deals, shootings, and murders happen on a regular basis. Vick told the Daily Press of Newport News in 2001 that he would, quote, "go fishing even if the fish weren't biting, just to get away from the violence and stress of everyday life in the projects." It was reported that Vick was 7 years old when he witnessed his first dogfight, a common occurrence in his neighborhood that went unquestioned. Vick started playing football in the yard with his brother, cousin, and dad, and then eventually at the local Boys and Girls Club. When he got to high school, Vick was a top-performing athlete on the football team, passing for thousands of yards and making touchdown plays. In 1998, he graduated high school and moved to Blacksburg, Virginia to attend Virginia Tech. During his first year, Michael Vick helped lead the Hokies to an undefeated season and a bowl championship game. He had many more successes while playing college ball, eventually landing him into the Virginia Tech Sports Hall of Fame. Michael Vick left Virginia Tech after his redshirt sophomore year. He was selected first in the 2001 NFL Draft by the Atlanta Falcons, where he ended up playing most of his career. He was the first black quarterback to be taken with the top pick, signing a 6-year, $62 million contract at the tender age of 21. He became a staple member of the team, driving key plays and breaking records. After his second Pro Bowl in 2004, Vick signed a 9-year, $130 million contract extension. He was also making millions on endorsements with Nike, Adidas, and other retail brands. At this point, Vick was a household name and a national superstar. It was a typical April evening in 2007. A 3-year-old Dutch Shepherd police dog named Troy started tracking a familiar scent to a parked car in the lot belonging to Royal Suite, which was a 2-story dance club in Hampton, Virginia. He started barking at the trunk. Police searched the car and found marijuana. When the owner of the vehicle came out of the club to his car, he was patted down. Police found more marijuana and arrested the man for drug possession with intent to sell. At this point, it was illegal to have marijuana in Virginia. His name was Davin Body, and he would eventually be indicted by a grand jury for this crime, receiving a 5-year suspended sentence. Body was 26 years old at the time of his arrest and one of the cousins with whom Michael Vick grew up playing football. Little did police know that Body would be leading them to something much more sinister than just a marijuana charge. Let's flash back about 6 years to the year 2001. Michael Vick was waiting to enter the NFL draft back in Newport News, Virginia. He one day set out wandering the streets of his hometown with his friend named Quantis Phillips. They ran into another friend named Tony Taylor. While the 3 childhood friends caught up on important news from each other's lives over the past few years, Taylor told them about his job working in the dogfighting business. According to the book The Lost Dogs by Jim Garant, it was at this point Michael Vick reminisced on his own childhood growing up watching the fights. After more banter back and forth, the 3 men allegedly devised a plan to begin a dog kennel business as a shell operation for dogfighting. Taylor would purchase and take care of the fighting dogs. Phillips would manage the business side of the kennel, and Vick, soon to be a millionaire, would fund the operation. They obtained a kennel license to house other people's dogs and built a website to promote their business called Bad News Kennels. Just a little bit of background on Tony Taylor. He was not the most upstanding citizen. He had been arrested for drug trafficking and cocaine possession and had to spend time in a New York State prison. He was a little bit older than his new business partners, but nonetheless, Tony Taylor scouted land for the business and convinced Vick to purchase a 16-acre piece of property in Surry County, which is roughly halfway between Richmond and Norfolk. It's an area known for its peanut farms, hams, Christmas trees, and ironically, it's a 45-minute drive to PETA headquarters, which is People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, very, very much against dogfighting. At the time of the purchase, the land was mostly trees. They were cleared to build black sheds, a high-end kennel with 20 stalls, and room for a trailer for Tony Taylor to live in. The trailer was eventually replaced with a nice house that Michael Vick and his friends would stay in when they were visiting. The 20-stall kennel had concrete floors, chain link walls, and aluminum roofing. A second floor was added to the largest black shed, accessible only by a secret pull-down staircase. And that will become important later. Michael Vick purchased the $34,000 piece of property slightly more than a month after signing his first NFL contract. The address was 1915 Moonlight Road. And this was the same address that Davin Body would give to the cops, arresting him 6 years later for marijuana possession in that dark club parking lot. At the time, Body was living on the property with Tony Taylor. 5 days after arresting Body, police searched 1915 Moonlight Road, and what they found was horrifying, and it would cause a national uproar for years to come. Police discovered over 50 dogs on the scene with evidence of a possible dogfighting operation in the form of blood spatter, dog treadmills, weights and scales, equipment used to pry open dog mouths, and a breeding apparatus known as the rape rack. Police needed backup. With the help of animal control officials, they removed all of the dogs, most of which were pit bulls, At first glance, many of the pit bulls bore scars but seemed physically healthy. They were skinny but not starving, but as the cops started searching the grounds more thoroughly, they found clearings in the property where dogs were tied up outside in these clearings, and those dogs were in worse condition. Some of them were too skinny and seemed feral, barking hysterically as the police cautiously approached. Others cowered as if afraid to be struck. 7 dog graves were found on site, and after excavating and examining them, it was determined that underperforming dogs were drowned, electrocuted, or hung. Unfortunately, the Surrey County Animal Shelter couldn't take more than 14 dogs, which meant that alternate shelters needed to offer space, or the remaining dogs would have to be cataloged as evidence and put down. Until this time, dogs seized from fighting rings were often put down. They were deemed too dangerous to put back into society because of their challenging backgrounds involving fighting, abuse, and generally just being fearful. Animal rights activists and shelters considered Michael Vick's case a platform to educate people about dogfighting and encourage bureaucratic changes in the way seized animals get treated and given second chances. Michael Vick was not at the scene during the search of the property, and he vehemently denied knowledge of dogfighting at the property. Charges were not filed against him at the time, but news outlets and the general public were outraged. This property belonged to Michael Vick. The public was confused as to how he could not know what was going on there. And unfortunately, this is just the beginning of Michael Vick's troubles. Let's take a minute to talk about what happens in a dogfight. But don't worry, I won't get graphic. This information comes from the ASPCA's website on dogfighting. The fights can take place anywhere, typically in a space about 14 to 20 square feet, with high sides to contain the dogs. In organized fights, dogs are weighed to be sure that they are an even match, then inspected for any illegal substances that may have been applied topically to harm the opposing dog. When the fight starts, the dogs are released from opposite corners and they clash in the middle of the ring, wrestling to grab and shake the opposing dog for maximum damage. The fights last anywhere from several minutes to several hours. Both animals suffer injuries, and although many fights are not to the death, it is not uncommon for dogs to succumb to their injuries later. Losing dogs are frequently discarded, killed, or left untreated for their injuries. If the losing dog is perceived to be an embarrassment to its owner, it could be executed in a brutal fashion as part of the entertainment. On May 3rd, just a few days after the raid of 1915 Moonlight Road, the Humane Society called upon the NFL to take a serious look at the problem of players' involvement in dogfighting. Until then, only 2 other professional athletes stood out with public allegations of dogfighting, and that was NBA's Quintel Woods, who pled guilty to animal abuse in 2005, as well as NFL running back LaShawn Johnson, who pled guilty to 3 charges related to dogfighting, also in 2005. The Humane Society called dogfighting a subculture among professional athletes, implying that there was a lot more going on than what had been discovered to that point in time. The NFL released this statement, quote, "Dogfighting is cruel, degrading, and illegal. We support a thorough investigation into any allegations of this type of activity. Any NFL employee proved to be involved in this type of activity will be subject to prompt and significant discipline under our personal conduct policy." In late May, An anonymous source with 3 decades of experience in dogfighting gave an internet-shattering interview to ESPN's Outside the Lines. The case, which had become somewhat stalled, blew up again against Michael Vick. The source claimed that Vick was one of the, quote, heavyweights of dogfighting. He estimated that Vick would spend $30,000 to $40,000 or higher in a single fight. Over the next few months, there was a lot of back and forth as officials tried to piece together the investigation legitimately with the best chance of conviction of the dogfighters and Michael Vick. On July 17th, Michael Vick, now 27 years old, Quantis Phillips, 28, and Tony Taylor, 34, as well as another associate, were indicted by a federal grand jury for competitive dogfighting, raising dogs for the purpose of fighting, and carrying the dogs across state lines. They all faced about $350,000 in fines and 6 years in prison if convicted. Meanwhile, fans and the general public were extremely unhappy with Michael Vick. Public demonstrations began outside of the NFL headquarters and the Falcons training camp. Participants were urging the NFL to, quote, sack Vick. They picketed with signs and t-shirts. They commented all over everything on the internet, and Falcons fans donated their Vick-related jerseys and shirts to the Atlanta Humane Society for use as animal bedding and cleaning rags. Crafty individuals produced dog chew toys that looked like Michael Vick. The public was just so angry and disgusted at this once-upon-a-time walking legend. Nike and Adidas suspended their Vick-associated product lines, and one by one, most of his endorsements did end. Later in July, all of the defendants showed up to their arraignment and pleaded not guilty to their charges. The next month, though, Michael Vick signed a plea agreement admitting to 1 count of conspiracy to travel in interstate commerce in aid of unlawful activities and to sponsor a dog in an animal fighting venture. His official statement maintains that he did not place any bets or take any prize money. The same day, he was suspended from the NFL without pay and was sentenced eventually to 23 months in prison. In a letter from the NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell to Michael Vick, Goodell wrote that his conduct was, quote, not only illegal, but also cruel and reprehensible. Goodell also freed the Atlanta Falcons to recover $22 million of Michael Vick's signing bonus from that 10-year, $130 million contract he signed back in 2004. A few athletes defended Vick publicly, likening the dogfighting to hunting, and for other various reasons. Roy Jones Jr., a boxer, was particularly an outspoken critic of the prosecution of Michael Vick. Others were a little more vague and just said that it was Michael Vick's property, so he could do what he wanted. So what happened to the dogs that were seized from 1915 Moonlight Road? At the time, the prevailing opinion of most animal welfare organizations and the law was to euthanize seized fighting dogs, as we said earlier. However, a large Utah-based no-kill animal shelter called Best Friends Animal Society lobbied hard against the summary execution of the dogs rescued from Bad News Kennels. A federal judge appointed a special guardian to help determine the dog's fate. Vick was ordered to place $1 million into an escrow account to help care for the dogs during this time. Of the nearly 50 dogs that were seized, only 1 had to be put down for its aggression, 1 for health issues, and the rest were deemed, finally, safe enough to be placed in the community, but under strict conditions. Based off an NPR article by Audie Cornish, Washington Post reporter Emily Giambalvo, 47 dogs were split up to 8 rescue organizations, and a majority of them went straight into foster homes and began living a new life, hopefully full of bacon and belly rubs. After 8 months in isolated kennels, 22 of the most difficult cases were transported all the way to Utah to the Best Friends Animal Sanctuary for rehabilitation. These dogs were named the Victory Dogs, spelled Vicktory. Caregivers customized training and care for each dog depending on their unique needs. Eventually, most of these dogs ended up getting adopted too. Best Friends actually created a documentary about the Victory Dogs, and you can watch it on their website, bestfriends.org/champions. Michael Vick went to prison in Virginia. His 23-month sentence was shortened to a 20-month sentence, of which the last 3 he spent on house arrest. While in prison, he filed for bankruptcy. Also, the state of Virginia charged him for 2 things to which Michael Vick pled guilty for, and those 2 charges were 1 count of unlawfully torturing and killing dogs and 1 of promoting dog fights. He received a 3-year suspended sentence. On July 20th, 2009, Vick was released from federal custody and was a free man again. 1 week later, NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell reinstated Michael Vick to the NFL. Between 2010 and 2015, Vick played football for the Eagles, Steelers, and the Jets, paying back nearly all of the $17 million in debt from his bankruptcy filing back in 2008. And that's a very hard thing to do. A lot of people who have to file for bankruptcy are not able to do that. He received team and league-based awards and began volunteering with the Humane Society to educate children and the public about dogfighting. He retired from football in 2017. At the time of this podcast, Vick is going into coaching and still faces criticism from the public and animal rights activists for his involvement in this scandal. It's hard to tell if Michael Vick is a changed man or if he ever received fair punishment for his crime. What we can certainly conclude, though, is that he is once again a rich man, and he did put effort into turning around his public image. Quote, "The best thing to do was make amends for what I did. I can't take it back," Vick said to the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette in 2016. "The only thing I can do is influence the masses of kids from going down the same road I went down. That's why I work with the Humane Society and affecting a lot of kids' lives and saving a lot of animals. We've been able to change some laws and do some great things that I'm very proud of." Thank you for listening to today's episode. If you heard or have any other feedback, please feel free to tweet me at SINPOD, that's SIN_POD on Twitter. Sources for this episode were the Humane Society Dogfighting Fact Sheet, the ASPCA position on pit bulls, an ESPN article by Kelly Nackey, the Lost Dogs book by Jim Garant, a bestfriends.org article by Christelle Del Preet, NPR article by Audie Cornish, ESPN article by Darren Rovell, a USA Today article by Scott Gleason, Daily Press article by Peter Desjardins, CBS News article about Michael Vick getting indicted by the grand jury, and History.com's recap of NFL star Michael Vick pleads guilty in dogfighting case. I will put all of the links available if you want to check those out. What do you talk about during an awkward silence at a family gathering? Every 2 weeks, mystery lover Alexis Morgan, that's me, tells you a sinful tale of real-life crime and drama on the podcast Scandal, Intrigue, Nightmares. If you need a good conversation starter or just an interesting story to hear on your drive to work, then listen to this true crime podcast. Bye.